The pre-dawn darkness over Tinian Island hung thick and heavy, broken only by the rhythmic pulse of aircraft engines warming up across the hardstand. March 1945. The war in the Pacific had become a grinding campaign of fire and steel, where massive silver bombers rose each day to rain destruction on the Japanese home islands, and where not all of them came back. Captain Robert Mack Mackenzie stood beneath the nose of his B-29 Superfortress, running his hand along the cold aluminum skin. Lucky Linda, they'd named her, after his wife back in Oregon. 11 missions. 11 times they'd flown into the teeth of Japanese defenses and clawed their way home. The number painted on her fuselage seemed to mock the superstition that no crew ever made it past a dozen. Coffee, Skipper? Mac turned to see his co-pilot, Lieutenant Danny Reeves, extending a battered tin cup. Steam curled up in the tropical air, and Mac took it gratefully. 23 years old, Reeves still had that eager look in his eyes, the one that hadn't yet been dulled by watching other crews fail to return. "Thanks, Danny." Mac sipped the bitter brew and glanced at his watch. 0447 hours. 13 minutes until engines start. Around them, the entire 58th Bombardment Wing was stirring to life. Crews emerged from their Quonset huts, flight suits half-zipped, cigarettes dangling from lips, faces set with that peculiar mix of resignation and determination that came with knowing you might not see another sunset. The target briefing 3 hours earlier had been straightforward: the Mitsubishi aircraft engine plant in Nagoya. A critical facility pumping out power plants for Japanese fighters that were bleeding their formations dry on every mission. Intelligence estimated heavy flak concentrations and at least 40 enemy fighters in the area. Standard operating procedure, which meant lethal. Master Sergeant Frank Kowalski, the flight engineer, appeared at Mac's elbow. At 32, Kowalski was the old man of the crew, a veteran who'd already done a full tour in Europe before volunteering for the Pacific. His weathered face showed every mile of those missions. "She's ready, Captain," Kowalski said, his Chicago accent thick even at this hour. "All 4 engines checked out. Oil pressure good. Fuel loads at max, 12,000 gallons. We're carrying 10 tons of incendiaries in the bomb bay." Mac nodded. 10 tons of M69 napalm cluster bombs. They'd learned the hard way that Japanese industrial targets, with their wood and paper construction mixed among the factories, burned like matchsticks. General LeMay's new doctrine was simple: if precision bombing couldn't knock out a target, burn down everything around it. The rest of the crew gathered beneath the bomber's massive wing. Bombardier Lieutenant James Patterson checked his Norden bombsight calculations one more time, his fingers stained with pencil lead. Navigator Lieutenant Howard Chen studied his charts under a hooded flashlight, plotting backup routes in case they had to break formation. Radio operator Staff Sergeant Billy Morton fidgeted with his equipment, while the gunners, Martinez in the tail, O'Brien in the upper turret, Wilson and Jackson in the blisters, and young Peters in the central fire control, went through their weapons checks with practiced efficiency. "All right, listen up," Mac called out, and 10 faces turned toward him. "This is mission number 12. I know some of you are thinking about that. Don't. We fly the same way we always do. Tight formation, follow the lead, and watch each other's backs. Nagoya's going to throw everything at us, but we've seen worse." Had they, though? Mac wasn't sure anymore. Each mission seemed to raise the bar on what worse could mean. "We've got 241 birds going up today," Mac continued. "That's the biggest strike package we've put together yet. The Japs will see us coming 100 miles out, and they'll be waiting. Our fighter escort will stay with us as long as their fuel holds, but we all know they can't go the whole way." He looked each man in the eye. "Stay sharp. Call out fighters early. Don't wait to confirm. If you think you see something, you sing out. We're stronger together than alone." The men nodded. No speeches about freedom or duty. They were past that now. This was about survival, about getting each other home. At precisely 0500 hours, The signal flares arced into the pre-dawn sky. Green. Go. Mac climbed through the forward hatch, settling into the left seat of the cockpit. The B-29's flight deck was a cramped space dominated by dozens of instruments, switches, and controls. Reeves slid into the right seat while Kowalski took his position at the flight engineer's panel behind them. Through the greenhouse-style windscreen, Mac could see other superfortresses beginning to taxi, their navigation lights blinking like fireflies in the darkness. "Tower, this is Lucky Linda, ready for engine start," Mac called over the radio. "Roger. Lucky Linda. You're cleared for start. Good hunting." "Number 1 engine," Mac announced. Kowalski worked the controls, and the rightmost engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life with a deep, thunderous growl. One by one, they brought all 4 right R-3350 engines online, each of the 18-cylinder radials producing 2,200 horsepower. The entire aircraft shook with barely contained power. They taxied into position, falling into line behind a bomber called Tokyo Rose. The runway stretched before them, a black ribbon carved into the coral island. Mac's hands moved across the controls with automatic precision born of hundreds of hours, checking trim tabs, setting flaps, confirming fuel mixture. "Lucky Linda, you're cleared for takeoff." Mac pushed the throttles forward, and all 4 engines screamed. The B-29 shuddered, reluctant at first under its crushing weight of fuel and bombs, then began to accelerate. Faster. The runway lights blurred past. 70 knots. 80. 90. "V1, Reeves called out. Mac pulled back on the yoke, and the nose lifted. For a moment, always that terrible moment, it seemed impossible that 140,000 pounds of metal could possibly leave the ground. Then the rumbling ceased, replaced by the steady roar of engines, and they were airborne. The sun was just breaking over the eastern horizon as they climbed through 5,000 feet, joining the massive formation assembling over the ocean. Dozens of bombers, then scores, then hundreds, a metallic armada stretching across miles of sky. From his cockpit, Mac could see them stacking up in their combat boxes, each group of bombers arranged to provide mutual defensive fire. "Navigator, give me a heading," Mac requested. "Course 345 degrees, Captain," Chen replied. "Time to target, 4 hours, 17 minutes. 4 hours and 17 minutes to Nagoya. 4 hours and 17 minutes to where the sky would fill with exploding flak and diving fighters. 4 hours and 17 minutes before they'd find out if Lucky Linda's luck would hold for mission number 12. As they leveled off at 25,000 feet, Mac glanced over at the nearest bomber flying off their right wing. He could see the pilot's face through the greenhouse nose, could see him mouth something to his co-pilot. 2 men he'd never met, flying 300 feet away, whose survival was tied to his own by invisible threads of formation discipline and mutual protection. The Pacific stretched endlessly below them, a wrinkled blue-gray blanket broken only by whitecaps. Beautiful and indifferent. Beautiful and full of death. Mac settled back in his seat, hands steady on the controls, and thought about the letter he'd written to Linda the night before. It was tucked in his jacket pocket, unsealed, waiting for him to add a postscript when, if, they returned. The formation droned on toward Japan, 241 bombers carrying a rain of fire. Behind them, Tinian Island disappeared into the morning haze. Ahead, somewhere beyond the curve of the earth, the enemy waited. And above it all, the sun climbed higher, indifferent to the men who flew beneath it, indifferent to what the next hours would bring. The dice were cast. Mission 12 had begun. The point of no return was already behind them. The monotonous drone of the engines had a hypnotic quality. 3 hours into the mission, somewhere over the Philippine Sea, Mac found himself fighting the urge to let his mind wander. He forced himself to scan the instruments again. Fuel consumption within parameters, oil pressure steady, cylinder head temperatures all in the green. Everything by the book. But something felt different today. Maybe it was the unlucky mission number. Maybe it was the way the morning briefing officer had hesitated before revealing the fighter opposition estimate. Or maybe it was just the accumulated weight of 11 previous missions pressing down on his shoulders like a physical thing. "Captain, we're picking up radio traffic," Morton's voice crackled through the intercom from his radio operator station behind the cockpit. "Sounds like the lead formation is already mixing it up with enemy fighters. They're still 70 miles ahead of us." Mac felt his chest tighten. Early interception. That wasn't in the plan. "How many bogeys?" he asked. "Can't tell yet, sir. But it sounds like a lot." From his tail gunner position, Martinez came on the intercom. "Skipper, I've got visual on explosions at our 11 o'clock high way out. Looks like flak or fighters hitting someone." "Stay sharp, everyone," Mac ordered, his voice calm despite the adrenaline starting to flood his system. "Peters, how's the fire control radar?" "Picking up multiple contacts, Captain," the young Central Fire Control gunner replied, his voice tight. "The scope's lighting up like a Christmas tree. There must be 30, maybe 40 fighters ahead." 30 to 40. Against 241 bombers. The math should favor them, but combat math never worked out the way it did on paper. The Japanese pilots were getting more desperate, more willing to press attacks to point-blank range. Some were even ramming now. "Navigator, time to IP?" Mac asked, referring to the initial point where they'd begin their bomb run. 22 minutes, Captain," Chen responded. "We should be picking up the Japanese coast any second now." As if on cue, a dark smudge appeared on the horizon. Japan. Even from 25,000 feet, Mac could make out the contours of the coastline, the irregular shapes of bays and peninsulas. Somewhere down there, radar operators were already tracking them, fighter control centers were scrambling every available aircraft, and flak batteries were being loaded and elevated. "There it is, boys," Mac said quietly. "The land of the rising sun." "More like the land of the rising flak," Reeves muttered, and despite the tension, a few nervous chuckles rippled through the intercom. The formation tightened up as they crossed the coast. Mac could feel Lucky Linda buffeted by the wake turbulence from the bomber ahead and to the left. Flying this close to other aircraft, sometimes less than 100 feet apart, required constant attention. One moment of inattention, one wrong control input, and two bombers could collide in a catastrophic fireball. The Japanese countryside unfolded beneath them like a detailed map. Rice paddies, villages, roads threading through valleys. It looked peaceful from up here, almost serene. But Mac knew better. Down there, people were looking up, hearing the thunder of hundreds of engines, knowing what was coming. "Fighters! Fighters at 2 o'clock high." O'Brien's voice exploded from the upper turret. "They're diving on the lead formation." Mac craned his neck, trying to spot them. Then he saw small dark shapes plummeting down from above like stooping hawks. The air around the lead bombers erupted in tracer fire, a deadly light show of red Japanese tracers and white American tracers crossing in beautiful, lethal patterns. A B-29 in the forward group shuddered as cannon shells tore through its wing. Smoke streamed back. The bomber held formation for a few seconds, then began to fall away, one engine trailing flames. Mac watched, hoping to see parachutes, but the stricken aircraft simply nosed over and began its final dive. "Don't watch it," Mac told himself as much as his crew. "Stay focused on our job." The Japanese fighters, mostly Ki 44s and a few Ki 61s, weren't done. Having savaged the lead formation, they turned their attention to the second wave. To Mac's group. "Here they come," Jackson called from his blister position. 4 o'clock level. 6, no, 8 of them. Mac saw them now. 8 fighters in a loose line, approaching from the side. The standard tactic, attack from the beam where the bomber's defensive fire was weakest, pour in cannon and machine gun fire, then break away before the formation's combined firepower could nail them. "Steady," Mac breathed. "Hold formation. Gunners, pick your targets." The fighters opened fire at 800 yards. Mac saw the twinkling lights of their guns, then heard the distinctive crack, crack, crack of 20mm cannon shells passing nearby. The air filled with tracer rounds, a storm of metal moving at 2,000 feet per second. Lucky Linda's own guns roared to life. O'Brien's twin .50 calibers in the upper turret hammered out long bursts. The side gunners joined in, and the acrid smell of cordite filled the aircraft. The noise was deafening even through the headsets. A Key 44 flashed past their nose, so close Mac could see the pilot's face, the dark goggles, the white scarf. Then it was gone, trailing smoke from its cowling. "I got him! I got him!" Wilson shouted from his blister. "Can it, Wilson?" Kowalski barked. "Stay on your sector." More fighters pressed in. A Key 61, its inline engine giving it a distinctive profile, made a head-on pass at the bomber flying off their left wing. The two aircraft rushed toward each other at a combined speed of over 500 miles per hour. At the last second, the fighter's cannons lit up, and the B-29 took hits in its nose section. The bombardier's station greenhouse shattered, and Mac saw the aircraft yaw violently as the pilot fought for control. But they held formation. Damaged, bleeding, but flying. "IP in 5 minutes, Chen announced. "We're starting our run. The bomb run. The most dangerous part of any mission." For the next 10 minutes, they'd have to fly straight and level, making no evasive maneuvers, while Patterson lined up his bomb sight on the target and the bombardier in the lead aircraft prepared to drop. The moment those bombs fell, every aircraft in formation would toggle their own loads and turn for home. 10 minutes of flying like sitting ducks while everything in Japan tried to kill them. The flak started exactly on schedule. The Japanese gun crews were good, experienced, accurate, and relentless. Black clouds of shrapnel bloomed around the formation like evil flowers. Each burst made a distinctive crump sound that Mac could hear over the engine noise. One opened up directly ahead. Lucky Linda flew through the expanding cloud, and Mac heard metal fragments spatter against the fuselage like deadly hail. The aircraft bucked and shuddered. "We're hit," Kowalski called out. "Damage to the number 3 engine cowling, but she's still running." "Any casualties?" Mac demanded. "Negative, Captain. We're okay." Another burst, this one closer. The windscreen directly in front of Reeves cracked in a spiderweb pattern. "Jesus!" Reeves flinched but kept his hands on the controls. Mac's world narrowed to the instruments, to the bomber ahead of him, to the flak and fighters and the desperate need to hold position. His hands made constant tiny corrections on the yoke. Too much wake turbulence from the left. Slight updraft. Compensate. Stay steady. "Bomb bay doors are opening," Patterson announced. "I've got the target in sight. Lead aircraft should drop in 30 seconds. 30 seconds. The fighters knew it too. They pressed their attacks with suicidal determination. A Key 44 dove straight down through the formation, guns blazing, and clipped the tail of a B-29 aircraft over. Both machines shuddered, but somehow stayed airborne. 20 seconds. More flak. The sky was black with it. Mac's hands ached from gripping the controls so hard. 10 seconds. A fighter made a diving pass at Lucky Linda. Martinez's tail guns roared, tracers reaching out. The fighter kept coming, and Mac realized with horror that it wasn't pulling up. It was committed to a ramming attack. "Brace! Brace!" Mac shouted. The fighter passed less than 10 feet over their cockpit, so close Mac could feel the prop wash. Then it was gone, trailing smoke, dropping away. "Bombs away! Bombs away!" Patterson called out. Mac felt the aircraft lurch upward as 10 tons of ordnance dropped free. The bomb bay doors began closing. Around them, the entire formation was releasing, thousands of incendiary clusters tumbling down toward Nagoya. "We're clear. We're—" The explosion came from behind and below. Not flak. Something bigger. Lucky Linda lurched violently to the left. Alarms shrieked. The number 2 engine, left inboard, was suddenly covered in flames. The aircraft yawed hard, trying to roll, and Mac fought the controls with all his strength. "Fire in number 2. Kowalski shouted. "Fire in number 2. Oil pressure dropping. We're losing it." Through the chaos of alarms and shouting, Mac heard something else. A whistling sound. Air rushing past torn metal. And then he smelled it. Smoke. Acrid, thick smoke beginning to fill the cockpit. Something had gone catastrophically wrong, and they were still 800 miles from home. The smoke came first as wisps, thin gray tendrils snaking through the cockpit vents. Then it thickened, fast, turning the air inside Lucky Linda's flight deck into a choking gray fog. Mac's eyes immediately began to water, and he felt his throat constrict as he tried to breathe. "Fire suppression on number 2, he barked, his voice strained. "Kowalski, kill that engine." The flight engineer's hands flew across his panel. Pulling mixture cutoff, feathering prop, activating CO2. Even as he worked, Kowalski was coughing, his voice breaking. "Captain, the fire's not responding. Something's wrong with the suppression system." Through the smoke-obscured instruments, Max saw the nightmare unfolding in his gauges. Number 2 engine temperature pegged in the red. Oil pressure 0. RPM fluctuating wildly before Kowalski feathered the prop. But worse, much worse, the fire wasn't going out. In his side mirror, Mac could see orange flames licking back along the wing, dangerously close to the fuel tanks. "Reeves, help me hold her." Mac grunted, both men now pulling hard on their yokes to counter the asymmetric thrust from the dead engine. The B-29 wanted to roll left, to spiral down, and it took both pilots full strength to keep the wings level. The smoke thickened. Mac couldn't see his co-pilot anymore, just a vague shadow 3 feet away. The instruments were becoming ghostly shapes behind a gray curtain. "I can't see anything," Reeves shouted, panic edging into his voice. "Mac, I can't see. Stay on the gauges," Mac ordered, though he could barely see them himself. His lungs burned with each breath. The smoke was inside his eyes, his nose, his throat. He wondered abstractly if they were going to suffocate before they crashed. "Status report," Mac called out, fighting to keep his voice steady. "All stations, check in." "Tail gunner okay." Martinez coughed out. "Smoke's not as bad back here, but I can see the fire on the wing. Captain, it's spreading toward the fuel tanks." "Upper turret, okay." O'Brien's voice was barely audible through his coughing fit. "Radio, functioning." Morton managed. The other gunners checked in, all reporting smoke but no immediate casualties. Patterson, in the bombardier station in the nose, was in slightly better air. "Captain, I've got visibility," Patterson reported. "We're falling behind the formation. The other bombers are pulling ahead." Falling behind. That was a death sentence. A lone B-29 limping home was easy prey for any fighter with fuel and ammunition left. Their only hope was to stay with the formation, to keep the protection of those dozens of defensive guns. But Lucky Linda was dying. "Kowalski, what the hell is on fire?" Mac demanded. "If it's not the engine, what is it?" Through the smoke, Mac heard the flight engineer moving, opening access panels, checking systems. "Captain, Jesus Christ, it's not the engine." The flak burst. It must have severed a hydraulic line near number 2. "We've got hydraulic fluid spraying on the hot engine cowling. That's what's burning. The fluid, not the engine." Hydraulic fluid. Hot enough to ignite, burning at over 600 degrees. And with a severed line, the fire suppression system couldn't reach it. "Can you seal the line?" Mac asked, knowing the answer. "It's in the wing," Kowalski shouted back. "I'd have to climb out there to reach it. In flight. At 25,000 feet. Impossible." The outside temperature was minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind speed over 250 miles per hour. Even if a man could survive out on the wing, he'd be ripped off in seconds. The smoke kept coming. Mac fumbled with his oxygen mask, pulling it over his face and opening the valve. The pure oxygen helped, but the smoke was so thick now he still couldn't see his instruments clearly. He was flying blind, navigating by touch and memory. "We're losing altitude," Reeves called out, his voice muffled by his own oxygen mask. "Down to 24,000. 23,800. 23,600. Each foot lost was precious. They needed altitude to make it home. Needed altitude to stay above the mountains. Needed altitude to glide if another engine quit. "More throttle on 1, 3, and 4, Mac ordered, pushing the remaining 3 engines harder. "We've got to stay with the formation." "Captain, we're already at max continuous power," Kowalski protested. "If we push them harder, we'll burn them out." "Then we burn them out," Mac snapped. "Better to lose an engine over the ocean than over Japan." The bomber shuddered as the 3 remaining Wright R-3350s screamed under the increased load. Through the smoke, Mac heard new sounds, rattles, vibrations, things beginning to come apart under stress. And still the smoke poured into the cockpit. "Patterson, how far to the coast?" Mac asked. 72 miles, Captain. But at our current rate of descent and speed, I don't think we're going to make it at formation altitude." Translation: they'd have to descend, probably break formation to do it. And once they were alone and low, they'd be vulnerable. "Captain." Martinez's urgent voice cut through the intercom. "Fighters. 6 o'clock high. 3 of them, and they're diving on us." Of course. The Japanese pilots had spotted the wounded bomber, seen the smoke streaming back, recognized the kill. Like sharks sensing blood, they were coming in for the finish. "Gunners, engage," Mac ordered. "Martinez, they're your baby." The tail guns opened up, the twin .50 calibers pounding. Through the smoke-filled cockpit, Mac heard the distinctive sound of O'Brien's upper turret traversing, adding its fire to the defense. "They're splitting up," Martinez called. "One's coming straight in at 6, the other 2 are swinging wide." Standard tactic. Multiple angles of attack to divide defensive fire. Smart. And deadly. The first fighter, Mac caught a glimpse in his mirror, looked like a Ki-84, one of Japan's best, dove straight down Lucky Linda's tail. Martinez's tracers reached up for it, but the fighter pilot was good, jinking, making himself a difficult target. Then the fighter opened fire. The distinctive hammer of 20mm cannons. Mac felt the impacts, thud 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 thud, walking up the fuselage toward the tail section. "I'm hit," Martinez screamed. "My guns are jammed. The hydraulics." His voice cut off. "Martinez," Mac shouted. "Martinez, respond." Silence. Then weakly, "Still here, Captain. Took shrapnel in my leg. Both tail guns are out. I'm bleeding pretty bad." No tail guns. Their most important defensive position, the one that protected them from 6 o'clock attacks, was neutralized. The 2 other fighters pressed their advantage, swinging in from 8 and 4 o'clock. Jackson and Wilson returned fire from their blisters, but with the tail guns out, there was a massive blind spot. Another burst of cannon fire. More impacts. Mac heard something tear in the fuselage behind him, felt the airframe shudder. "Captain, we've got wounded," Morton called out. "Peters took a hit. He's unconscious. There's blood everywhere. 2 men down. Fire still burning. Smoke filling the cockpit. Fighters pressing their attack. And 720 miles from Tinian." The mathematics of survival were adding up to 0. "Reeves," Mac said quietly, his voice barely audible over the chaos. "If I tell you to bail out, you go. You understand? Don't argue, just go." "Mac." "That's an order, Danny." Through the smoke, Mac thought he saw his co-pilot nod. The 3 fighters regrouped for another pass. Mac watched them in the mirror, saw them line up, saw them dive. This was it. This was the killing run. Then, impossible, a miracle. P-51s. P-51s at 10 o'clock. O'Brien shouted. "Our fighters. They're engaging." Mac caught a flash of silver as 3 Mustangs dove past Lucky Linda, their 6.50 caliber guns blazing. The Japanese fighters scattered, breaking off their attack to deal with this new threat. One Ki-84 tried to turn inside a Mustang and lost. A long burst from the American fighter's guns shredded its wing, and it tumbled away, pieces flying off. The other 2 Japanese fighters broke contact and fled, probably low on fuel and ammunition. "Thank you, God," Reeves whispered. But they weren't safe. The Mustangs, already at their maximum range, could only stay a few more minutes before they had to turn back. And Lucky Linda was still on fire, still filling with smoke, still losing altitude. "Kowalski," Mac said, his voice hoarse from the smoke. "I need options. Give me something." The flight engineer was quiet for a moment. Then, "Captain, there's one thing we can try. It's insane, but it might work." "Tell me." "We side-slip the aircraft. Bank her hard to the left, cross-control the rudder, and literally blow the fire out with the airflow. Force the wind to strip the burning hydraulic fluid off the hot metal." Mac understood immediately. And understood why Kowalski called it insane. To sideslip a B-29 at low altitude with 3 engines and a half-blind crew was borderline suicidal. The aircraft could enter an unrecoverable spin. They could overstress the airframe and break apart. They could simply lose too much altitude and hit the water. But if they did nothing, the fire would reach the fuel tanks, and they'd explode. "Do it," Mac said. "Everyone, strap in tight. This is going to get rough." He waited until the P-51s cleared away, then rolled Lucky Linda into a steep left bank, toward the dead engine, toward the fire. At the same time, he mashed the right rudder pedal, cross-controlling the aircraft. The B-29 yawed, presenting its entire side to the slipstream. The effect was immediate and violent. The bomber shuddered like a living thing. The airspeed dropped dangerously. The altitude unwound faster. But through his mirror, through the smoke, Mac saw something beautiful. The flames were bending, stretching back, being torn away by the 250-mile-per-hour wind. "It's working!" Kowalski shouted. "The fire's dying." Mac held the slip for 10 seconds. 15. 20. The aircraft was shaking itself apart, every rivet and weld screaming. 25 seconds. "Fire's out. Fire's out." Kowalski confirmed. Mac leveled the wings, and Lucky Linda groaned back to straight and level flight. They'd lost 3,000 feet in the maneuver. But the fire was out. The smoke began to clear, slowly at first, then faster as fresh air circulated through the cockpit. Mac could finally see his instruments again, could see Reeves beside him, his co-pilot's face gray with smoke residue and streaked with sweat. "Status," Mac croaked. "Number 2 engine dead, obviously," Kowalski reported, his voice exhausted. "Number 3 is running hot. We overstressed it in the slip. We're down to 2.5 good engines. Hydraulic pressure is minimal. We've lost our tail guns. Peters and Martinez are both wounded. And we've got about 600 structural holes in the fuselage from the fighter attacks. Can we make it home? Kowalski was silent for a long moment. Ask me in 700 miles. Mac looked out at the Japanese coast, now falling behind them. The formation was miles ahead, beyond recall, beyond help. They were on their own now. Lucky Linda and her wounded crew, limping across the Pacific on damaged wings. The fire was out, but the fight for survival was just beginning.